Hello one and all, my name is John Clare, this is John's Dark Art, and you, as always, are very welcome. The piece we're looking at today is what I call the outsider, the companion, and me. While last week's piece was a personal tribute to someone I care about, this one is a little bit more different. It's a bit more introspective, because I'd say like since I started working digitally, which is about 6 or 7 years ago now, I've been a lot more interested in symbolism. And when it comes to skulls, something I've quite enjoyed drawing for some reason. Like generally in art, skulls usually have connotations towards death, or the Grim Reaper, or examining one's own mortality, which is something that I suppose because of the age I'm at now, I'm 42. So yeah, once I started hitting my mid-30s, I was because look, like everyone has, we all have our ups and downs in life, and during my particular down periods, let's just say I've examined my own mortality. And with this one here, yeah, it is a bit like that. It is about kind of examining my mortality, examining death, examining all that kind of stuff. And while that's not exactly the most cheeriest subjects, I admit, essentially that's what it's about. It's about me kind of being very introspective rather than it just being a demonstration of skill like a lot of my prior works would be. Because a lot of what I did prior to that were just demonstrations of technique or demonstrations of skill, as opposed to kind of looking inward and looking at myself and trying to show something a bit more kind of meaningful in my work. So anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the piece. We're going to jump into the time lapse, and I'm going to walk you through the process, shall we say. Okay, so we're going to do that now. So here we are. So I'm going to punch into Procreate. Here we are. This is the piece. This is the outsider, which is represented by the ram, the companion, which is represented by the wolf skull, and me, which is represented by the human skull, obviously. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go into time-lapse replay. There we are. So as you can see here now, what I'm doing, I'm starting off with the human skull. I'm just roughing out the lines, and we also bear in mind these are actually done on individual layers within Procreate. So each drawing has its own layer. The reason I do this is so I can then compose the image as I go. What I'm essentially doing here is, I'm kind of drawing out the skull, getting all the teeth in, and it's a fairly detailed drawing at this stage. I'm just kind of, and as you can see here also, I'm starting to draw. This is a raven skull that I didn't actually use in the composition in the end, because I just felt like 3 elements was enough for the drawing. I think it conveyed the meaning that I was trying to convey, shall we say. So yeah, this is me kind of roughing out the image. And as you can tell now that I've kind of decided what I'm going to do, basically what this is, if I kind of just, what I'm doing here is, as you can see, like all 4 elements are shown. Now if I just hop out of this for a second, I'm just going to show you quickly, like these are the individual layers. Okay, so if I can actually bring back the little raven skull if I want to. So that, by clicking that on and off, it, so if I just want to focus on one particular element, I can then take these 2 off, focus on what I'm doing here, and once that's done, then I can then bring this element back in. I can get rid of that element, focus on that. So that's essentially what's going on. So let's hop back into the replay. Now that I've got my composition more or less where I want it, and that I'm happy with it, and at this stage the raven skull is still going to be a part of it, but now I've gotten rid of everything else that's going to cause a distraction. That enables me to focus on what I want to be doing, which is the ram skull now. So this is like me refining my drawing. What some artists do, what they'll do is they'll actually have like an under drawing. I don't generally do that. It's just not something I do. Yeah, what I tend to do is I rough out my lines, and then I'll come back and refine the drawing. And once I have the drawing more or less to where I want it, then I'll start kind of like putting in the shading and getting the details in. So this is what we're doing here now. As I said before, like my shading technique essentially is cross hatching, just lots of cross hatching. and then, you know, it's adding and taking away as I see fit. If you like, I'm creating blocks of tone. When you punch in, I mean, this is like a 1080p replay, so you do kind of lose a little bit of detail when you're punching in. This is what I'm doing. So with the horn here, I'm kind of like blocking in the tone first. And now what I'm doing here, I'm kind of like breaking it up, making it a bit more manageable for me to like add in these details, because these details here, and this is where like the bulk of the drawing was. It was in the ram horns. You know, just adding in all these like little details. I mean, this stuff down here was just so little time consuming. Funny enough, it actually got easier the further I went, because there's less detail required. Because like if you look at any ram horn, it's like they're layers almost. So that's what I'm doing. I'm adding the layers of detail become not so. There isn't less detail, because like as you can tell, like up here, there's like lots of cracks and interesting shapes and crevices and things like that make ram horns really interesting to draw. So yeah, adding tone, blocks of tone, shall we say, breaking the sections up, making it more manageable, and that's pretty much exactly what I'm doing on the other side here, just adding on these loads of little details. And sometimes like adding detail doesn't mean necessarily making more lines. Sometimes the details can be done through introducing shade, introducing contrast. So that's exactly what I'm doing here, just introducing more contrast, introducing more shading, until I'm happy with the piece. Now what I'm doing here, if I pinch out a little bit. Also, I think sometimes it's just a good idea to get the hardest bit out of the way first, you know, because once that's out of the way, then everything else becomes easier. And I know, you know, it's all very well me saying easier, but yeah, if you get the hardest bit out of the way, it just makes everything else more manageable. So here I am, I'm down here doing the wolf skull. Yeah, you can see me like reshaping the skull a little bit here, and then kind of like shading in all the, you know, under the side, and again shading, adding blocks of color. Don't be and also another thing, I know I've mentioned this before, when it comes to, especially when it comes to like younger artists, there's almost like this, they tend to have kind of almost like a very flat, even with the darker part of the shading, because it's almost like you're intimidated by the medium. Don't be, man. Don't be shy of adding more contrast, because you can always take away, you know, especially digitally. And don't worry about making mistakes, because, you know, what was it Bob Ross used to say? They're happy little mistakes. You know, don't worry about making mistakes. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, I'm pretty sure if you put this drawing up against like the reference source, it probably isn't perfect. So what? It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to be happy with it. I think that's important too. As long as you're happy with it, and don't be shy about like changing things out and restructuring things, like I'm doing here. Look. I'm restructuring the drawing as I'm going through it and refining. Also, you know, sometimes you know I'll be kind of adding bits and take. I think maybe what I'm doing here, I did this piece a couple of years ago. So what I think I was doing here is I'm just kind of checking the tone of the skull of the wolf compared to the tone of the skull of the ram. Maybe, I'm not too sure. Actually, I think that was, see this, right, adding a bit, admitting a bit of a mistake here. I think like that's this kind of black section here. I should really have left that blank. Something I may revisit when I go back to the drawing at some point. Also, another thing, don't be worried about going back to something. Nothing's ever finished until you say it's finished. I may yet go back into this drawing and add that raven skull. Who knows? And here we are. I'm now drawing the human skull now. And again, it's like, it's not, line work doesn't have to be where the detail is. Sometimes it is done through tone. Sometimes it is done through blocks of color if you're painting or whatever. You know, this is me. And again, allow your drawings to have contrast. You know, don't be intimidated by that. If you're drawing in pencil, don't be shy about getting a darker pencil and pressing harder or whatever else you need to do. At the end of the day, your drawing is only done when you say it's done. And like, if you can tell, like the only time I'm really adding like line work in order to get detail is on the teeth here, because they are much smaller items. Whereas with where bigger spaces, if you want to add detail, sometimes you just need to add, you know, use your shading to add the detail and to add the structure. And I think at this point, yeah, you can tell like right towards the end here, I'm kind of, at this point, I'm kind of debating, do I need this skull, raven skull? Is it important? No, was the answer in the end. Then, yeah, as you can tell, this is the image that I was happy with at that time. Now, if I was to let this play all the way through, that's half an hour. So the reason why it'd be half an hour, if we hop into statistics, let's go into that. So we go canvas information, and there we are. So this piece was well, I started this piece in the 22nd of November 2020. I think I finished, this piece actually took me a long time because I kept going away and come back to it, going away and come back to it. I think I finished it like sometime in early 2021. I can't remember when exactly. And if we go into statistics, 74 hours and 29 minutes. Total strokes made, 47,766. So this drawing took me a long time to do. And most of that time was actually done with these details here. But the thing is, like, do I think it was worth doing? 100%. And am I happy with the end result? Yes, there are mistakes that I made. Like I said, I think I need to get rid of this at some point because, you know, all that really, that's just empty space. So that doesn't need to be there. I can get rid of that. And maybe at some point, who knows, I might decide to myself, I might say to myself, okay, maybe that raven skull does need to be in there and I'll finish it off. Is it? As I keep saying, your piece isn't finished until you decide it's finished. And if you want to come back to it later on and do something different with it, you can. It's your work. Okay, so that's the piece there now. That's the outside of the companion and me. Let's round this out, shall we? So yeah, that was the outside of the companion and me. That was the process in which I used to create the piece. And to talk a little bit about it, like I said before, it's a bit of an examination on mortality. And yeah, I know it sounds pretty grim and a bit depressing, but not necessarily. I mean, like, you got to bear in mind, like, when it comes to the life that we lead, you know, you've only got this one shot to do anything. And being cognizant and being aware of death in of itself isn't a bad thing. I think the reason why I chose the symbolism of the black sheep and the black dog, like feeling like an outsider, feeling depressed, and how that can, in some people, lead them to do something pretty drastic. Mental health is definitely a major concern and something that needs to be taken seriously. And if you are, for whatever reason, let's just say examining your own mortality in that way, please get help. Trust me, like, I've, you know, at various points in my life, I've gone through therapy and that has helped. And it has helped me to kind of, to come to a position in my life where, like, looking at these subjects and examining them in my art, in my own peculiar way, is, for me, quite a healthy thing to do. Like I said, like, examining these subjects and expressing them through your work, again, whether it is art, whether it is music, I keep saying this before, creativity is creativity at the end of the day. And one thing I definitely do believe is art is the culmination of human creativity. Don't be frightened about confronting yourself in your own work. Don't be frightened of expressing yourself in your own work. I mean, you may not necessarily, depending on where you are in learning your craft, you may not be ready to do that yet. I think it took me a while to come to the point where I felt comfortable enough to do that. If examining these things in your work enables you to kind of help process whatever it is that you may be going through, I would advise trying to do. But also, if you are in a particularly bad place, please get help. And then once you've received that help, and hopefully you're on the other side of that, and you feel that you want to examine where you were from a better place, then yeah, absolutely do that. The one thing I will say is, like, don't be intimidated by heavy issues. Don't be intimidated by examining things that you may not feel comfortable about. You don't necessarily have to share those like I'm doing here. You're not obligated to. So let me just round this out by saying, and I will emphasize this point, if you are in trouble, please get help. Speak to a therapist or speak to a close family member, because there is another side to that. And once you're on the other side to that, trust me, things will only get better. As hard as it may be to believe. I suppose maybe this is because it's something I've wrestled with in the past. It's difficult for me to kind of talk about it, articulate it. I am on the other side of that now. And it's taken a long time, but I am on the other side to that. And I think now, hopefully, through my artwork and through making these videos, that maybe in some small way I might be able to help or give a little bit back. Who knows? Anyway, look, I think we'll leave it there for now. So, my name's been John Clare. This has been John's Dark Art. And as always, you have been very welcome. Oh, and as a quick reminder, I do have a website. It's called johnsdarkart.com. If you'd like to see this piece or any of my other work, you'll find them there. Till next time.